Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, I thought that I would talk about this Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney situation since it seems to be big news. And overall, we're going to talk about it today. We're actually going to review a video by this one channel named Dante's Boxing Nation, who is a part of New Media, which is pretty much a part of the LDBC. And if you've watched some of my recent videos, you know how I feel about them. They're not the most logical and objective bunch. They do push a pro-racial agenda. They do push a bunch of propaganda. But this is an interesting case. Now, of course, once again, because they have a pro-racial agenda, the fighter that they're going to try and push and promote the most in that 135-pound division is going to be a Devin Haney and a Gervonta Tank Davis. But they're really pushing this guy, Devin Haney, because before Gervonta Tank Davis was even there, the number one guy was Lomachenko in that division before he recently lost to Teofimo Lopez. And they were really hoping that Devin Haney would eventually face Lomachenko and defeat him. Well, now Teofimo Lopez is at the top of that division, and now they're pushing for Devin Haney to defeat a Teofimo Lopez. So it is what it is. Anyways, here's the question. Because Ryan Garcia is also another one of those top contenders at the 135-pound division. And one thing that Oscar De La Hoya said, I believe this was yesterday, but it could have been a couple of days ago, I can't remember. Oscar De La Hoya said apparently before Ryan Garcia faces a Devin Haney, who is the WBC champion right now, Devin Haney that is, Devin Haney would have to build up his profile, which is interesting. So I wanted to talk about today, at least in my personal opinion, is Ryan Garcia serious about taking these fights? And we're going to talk about it today. We're going to see what Dante's Boxing Nation has to say. I'm going to try the best that I can to put an objective and logical spin on things. Let's get into it.
We can fight next with Devin Haney, and so
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So after all them clips I just played for you, you heard what Oscar De La Hoya said. You heard what Ryan Garcia said to Eddie Hearn, or maybe I should say you heard what Eddie Hearn said to Ryan Garcia. In that clip, you heard Eddie Hearn putting a lot of pressure on Ryan Garcia to take the Devin Haney fight if he doesn't fight Manny Pacquiao or Tank Davis next. And you heard...
And that's a big question. Is Ryan Garcia serious about taking those fights? We'll see what happens. I'm not going to necessarily allege anything for right now, because Ryan Garcia, as of right now, at least for me, doesn't really have a track record. But I do find it, like a Jamal Charlo. But one thing I will overall say is this. It is very weird why you would not try and take a championship level fight. It is what it is when you're his mandatory. But if you were to get a Gervonta Tank Davis fight next, I could understand that. Now, the Manny Pacquiao fight next, and a certain amount of people may not disagree, I don't necessarily think that that is as much of a legacy fight as a Gervonta Tank Davis fight or a Devin Haney fight. And the reason why I say that is because Manny Pacquiao most likely would probably beat the living shit out of Ryan Garcia. A certain amount of people are not going to get what I'm about to say, but when certain fighters all of a sudden move up 2 weight divisions and fight a great fighter up 2 weight divisions out of nowhere, not even just 1 weight division, but 2 weight divisions, that usually can be a sign that they don't want to face certain fighters at their own weight class. I seen the same thing with Kell Brook when he didn't want to face Errol Spence Jr. and he fought Gennady Golovkin. I seen the same thing from Mikey Garcia when he didn't want to face Vasyl Lomachenko and he went up to face Errol Spence Jr. Because their mindset basically is, well, I'd rather get my ass whooped against someone twice my size and have an excuse than rather get my ass whooped possibly against a guy, who is the same size as me, possibly even smaller than me. And that is really what their mentality is. So if Ryan Garcia gets a fight with Gervonta Tank Davis next, I think that's acceptable. The Manny Pacquiao fight, of course, if you're able to get that, it certainly is not a, obviously that's a big fight. But when it comes down to it, to me, that's kind of a sign that Ryan Garcia is not serious about facing some of these 135-pounders. And some people are not going to get that. But once again, I'll just ask you this question. If you were in a bar fight, would you find it more embarrassing to lose to someone twice your size? Or would you find it more embarrassing to lose to someone your own same size? That's the problem that comes in. So some of these guys would rather get their ass whooped and have the excuse overall, well, I just lost because I was a smaller fighter, instead of actually facing people in a very similar size fight with people in their own division. We're going to see how serious Ryan Garcia is a little bit later on down the line. So we'll see what happens.
Oscar De La Hoya say, we're waiting on the WBC to figure out what they're going to do when it comes to the Devin Haney fight. Fast forward to present day, now Oscar De La Hoya, he says that Devin Haney, he needs to do more. He needs to fight some dangerous opponents to get a fight with the challenger, Ryan Garcia. Oscar De La Hoya is saying the champion needs to do more to fight the mandatory who's fighting in eliminators just to fight the champion.
And let me tell you this, do I think Devin Haney is as avoided as many people like to say? Personally, no. It seems like he's called out certain people right after they've set up certain fights. It seems like he kind of times things like that, at least from what, I've seen. So it is what it is. But Devin Haney at least does appear to trying to get some of those big fights. And do I believe that Devin Haney wants Ryan Garcia? It certainly seems like he does. So we'll see what happens.
Just when you think you heard it all, somebody comes up with a new fancy tune. It's really sad when you think about it, because whenever you hear anyone say words like, that guy, you don't even need to know the name of who they're talking about. If you just heard someone say in an interview, that guy needs to fight someone, he needs to fight better competition, he doesn't deserve to fight so-and-so. We're looking at that fight down the line. That fight there's no point in taking that fight right now. Whenever you hear anyone say something like that, they are most likely talking about a black fighter. At least.
And here we go with Dante pulling the race card again. Once again, are there certain double standards against black fighters? I'm not going to deny that. But Dante, let's be real. You don't criticize all fighters evenly, so it is what it is. But when it comes down to it, there are certain Latino fighters and Caucasian fighters that have received a decent amount of criticism for not facing certain top contenders. One of those fighters would be Leo Santa Cruz, who did deserve a certain amount of criticism because Leo Santa Cruz, for a good majority of his career, had, or at least for a certain amount of his career, had avoided certain top contenders. So it is what it is.
99% of the time. Now, let me go ahead and quote exactly what Oscar De La Hoya said so I can go ahead and unpack it all for you guys. He said, quote, Haney has to fight somebody that has a chance to beat him, just like Ryan Garcia did facing Luke Campbell and Javier Fortuna in his next fight. That's the way you build and make big fights.
You haven't really had a big fight. You boxed Luke Campbell, it's a great win.
Now, just to add on to what Eddie Hearn just said in that clip right there, it's already crazy to hear Oscar De La Hoya say the champion has to do something more deserving to fight his own mandatory. But then he goes even further with the hypocrisy by saying Devin Haney needs to fight someone that can beat him, like Ryan Garcia did when he fought against Luke Campbell and Javier Fortuna that he's about to face next. Luke Campbell? What makes that so crazy is Devin Haney is fighting against Jorge Linares. Jorge Linares is the same person that beat Luke Campbell before Ryan Garcia did.
Well, let's be real about this. And I know new media and the LDBC, they're going to try to frame it like this. If Devin Haney beats Jorge Linares in a fashion that no one has as of recent, what they're going to say is, oh my God, Devin Haney, we know he's the real deal because Devin Haney beat Jorge Linares in the same, in a worse fashion than what Lomachenko did. And overall, so Jorge Linares has not been the same fighter ever since that Lomachenko knockout. He looks even more hittable now, even more damaged now. He is not the same fighter. To be honest with you, I would not be surprised if that were a complete shutout by Devin Haney because Jorge Linares is a complete shell of himself. He is a complete shell of himself. So we'll see what happens.
And then you could also ask the question, well, if that's the case, how did Romero Duno get a shot at Ryan Garcia? Who did he beat? Not only does it not make sense what Oscar De La Hoya just said, but even Ryan Garcia himself is not agreeing with what his own promoter said. Because this is why Ryan Garcia said he wasn't fighting Devin Haney. Check out this clip.
Toughest challenge would be, I think, against Devin Haney.
On all the top lightweights, he makes the less money. You have the most followers, the most everything, but you make the less money. How does that make sense? How are you the money guy? He doesn't have a belt and he makes the less money.
Ryan Garcia overall, the biggest threat to him, actually, when it comes down to the way that I see it, Devin Haney is actually the least amount of a threat to him. You know, once again, I know the LDBC and new media, they really like to push Devin Haney. I've just never been overly impressed with him. That's not saying that he's not a very good fighter. He is. But when I take a look at him, do I see Gervonta Tank Davis? No. Do I see Teofimo Lopez? No. Do I see even a Lomachenko, who seems to have a little bit of problems with those elite fighters' size? No. So it is what it is.
They want to.
That's a 50-50 fight between Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia, and this is just my personal opinion. Out of all the elite 135-pounders that are there, they're the two weakest links.
People want to fight him. With no disrespect, I like Ryan. Me and Ryan, we got a lot of history together, and I like him. But they want to fight you because they feel like you have followers and you are the weakest link. That's what they feel.
Okay, so you heard Ryan Garcia right there actually disagreeing with Oscar De La Hoya, telling Oscar the real reason why the fight is not happening, and telling the public because he believes Devin Haney would be the most difficult fight out of everyone in the lightweight division. And it's interesting, now what makes that so interesting is because right after he says that, then you hear Devin Haney say everyone believes that you are the weakest link. You know, it's crazy because
I believe Devin Haney is the weakest link. It's either Ryan Garcia or Devin Haney as the weakest elite link at 135. And a certain amount of people may not like that, but it is what it is.
if you pay attention to what Teofimo Lopez, Devin Haney, Tank Davis, and Ryan Garcia, if you listen to what they have all said about each other in that bracket, they're pretty much telling us that they believe Ryan Garcia and Teofimo Lopez are the weakest links out of the four.
Well, I can tell you this, Teofimo Lopez certainly is not the weakest link. You're going to try and propagate that because, once again, we all know what your main agenda is. Teofimo Lopez right now has to be counted as the strongest link. Now, if we just talk about from a talent perspective, who do I think are the strongest links there? I think as of right now, Teofimo Lopez and Gervonta Tank Davis are the strongest links there. I think they're the strongest fighters there. Maybe Lomachenko could make a comeback, but I just don't know if he can handle those guys' size combined with their skill sets. Because Lomachenko is probably a natural 130-pounder, and some of these guys might be natural 140-pounders. So it's a very decently big difference at times. So it is what it is.
Because Ryan Garcia said, and I played the clip on my previous video when he said it, not only did Ryan Garcia say he thought Devin Haney was the toughest out of the bunch, but he also said Devin Haney beats Teofimo Lopez and Tank Davis beats Teofimo Lopez as well.
Well, I can tell you this. Devin Haney, in my opinion, would not beat a Teofimo Lopez. I just don't see it. Teofimo Lopez and Devin Haney, at least when I watch them fight, they fight somewhat similarly. But Teofimo Lopez, in my opinion, is better than in almost every category. He's a better athlete, more defensively responsible, in my opinion, gets hit less, more experienced against elite competition. I don't see Devin Haney beating Teofimo Lopez. The only two fighters there I could see possibly defeating Teofimo Lopez, maybe Lomachenko in a rematch, and Gervonta Tank Davis. Those are the only two.
And Teofimo Lopez, he said Ryan Garcia may not be the best in the bunch, but he has a big following. So it's like he pretty much was saying that he felt Ryan Garcia was the weakest link. Once again, none of them are saying that Tank Davis or Devin Haney is the weakest link. With that being said, go.
Okay, but if we look at it logically and objectively, Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia are the two weakest links there. And to be honest with you, I think overall that's a 50-50 fight. I don't really know who I would favor in that fight. I think before the Luke Campbell fight, I would have favored Devin Haney by a little bit. But after taking a look at his speed and power, and I knew that he always had speed and power because I've seen him in a multitude of fights, but I didn't know if he had that type of power. It's very clear he has very decent power. He can hurt you. And I believe he has more power than a Devin Haney. I believe he's a better athlete than Devin Haney when it comes down to it. Better skill set than Devin Haney? Well, that would need to be proved in that fight. They both have decent skill sets. But they both are the weakest links there at 135 pounds.
Going back to what Oscar De La Hoya said, you know it's really funny because when he says that the champion has to fight some tough fighter or he has to do more to fight against the mandatory Ryan Garcia, the funny thing is, if you notice in the sport of boxing, usually whenever there's a really, really weak champion who hasn't fought anyone, a lot of top contenders would go after that champion first. For example, Canelo Alvarez's first title shot, he fought against Matthew Hatton. Matthew Hatton, who's Ricky Hatton's brother, who didn't even actually fight at junior middleweight, but Canelo's people had him move up there so they could fight him for a title, right? Talk about not deserving a shot. And then you have Avni Yildirim, who was supposed to...
And of course, what they're trying to allege once again is that, oh, Canelo, he cherry-picked throughout his whole entire career. Listen, man, if you know Canelo Alvarez's career, Canelo has fought a lot of great fighters. So these guys can try to promote any bullshit narrative that they want to. Listen, at the end of the day, Canelo has wins over Golovkin. He has wins over Lara. He has wins over Austin Trout, wins over Miguel Cotto, Sergey Kovalev, Callum Smith, and a couple of other fighters that I forget to mention right now. Danny Jacobs. He has wins over all those guys. All right? All those guys you can count as A-class fighters.
So originally fight for the vacant belt against Canelo at 168. What did he do to deserve a shot at Canelo Alvarez? When Canelo fought the champion Rocky Fielding, who did Rocky Fielding beat to get to fight against the challenger Canelo Alvarez?
That's great, but the Ryan Garcia-Canelo Alvarez situation is a completely different situation. Because Ryan Garcia may not be fighting a fighter that's better than a Devin Haney next. When you talk about Canelo Alvarez, he's fighting a Billy Joe Saunders, who at least is going to be similar on a similar level to a Demetrius Andrade or a Jamal Charlo. Some may even argue above. That's where the problem comes in. That's why no one is going to bitch and complain why Canelo Alvarez is not fighting Demetrius Andrade and Jamal Charlo. Because there's just not a big following for it. Besides the LDBC and new media fan bases. Now, once again, would I like to see those fights? Of course I would. But when it comes down to it, if Canelo does not seem overtly interested in you, you're going to have to take some of the bigger fights in order to separate yourself from the rest of that pack. And I'm sorry, but Jamal Charlo very clearly does not seem interested in doing that. And to be honest with you, I'm not really sure how Demetrius Andrade is. I'm not really sure how serious he is either. So it is what it is.
I mean, I could do this all day. You guys get the point. You know, at the end of the day, if you're a real champion and you feel the guy that's holding the belt is not worthy, he's not a real champion, he doesn't deserve to be in that spot, that should be more of an incentive for you to take him out and put that belt around your waist. That makes more sense because, once again, this is usually what always happens. Meanwhile, Ryan Garcia is fighting against Javier Fortuna next in another title eliminator just to fight for Devin Haney's belt. The same champion that, once again, Oscar De La Hoya says doesn't deserve to fight against this mandatory, Ryan Garcia. We all know what time it is. Let's see who Ryan Garcia ends up facing next. Is he going to go after Tank Davis? He keeps saying he still wants a Tank Davis fight. We'll see if that happens. Fellas, I've got some great news.
And that's pretty much the end of this. And we are going to see how serious Ryan Garcia is. We'll see if he ends up facing a Tank Davis. If he faces a Tank Davis instead of a Devin Haney, I think that's acceptable. Now, a Manny Pacquiao fight, once again, a certain amount of people may disagree. To me, fighting a Manny Pacquiao kind of screams that you would rather get your ass kicked against a fighter 2 weight classes heavier than you than possibly someone in your own weight class. That's usually what that screams. Because once again, when we take a look at legacy, Ryan Garcia really doesn't have a lot to lose in that fight. Of course, he could possibly get physically hurt, but in terms of legacy, those fighters that move up 2 weight classes and are obviously outsized, they don't have anything to lose in terms of legacy. What's going to be remembered is that, they had the big cojones and overall, they were able to move up 2 weight classes and, challenge the bigger guys, and he just lost because he was too small. Whether if you lose to a guy your own same size, there's going to be no excuse. So once again, for a certain amount of people that don't get that, I just, re-explained it. But it is what it is. Anyways, I'm hoping Ryan Garcia is serious about facing a Tank Davis. We'll see what happens. Hopefully that fight were to happen. Would be a very interesting fight. We'll see what happens. But anyways, thank you all so much for watching. Hopefully Ryan Garcia is serious about facing these guys. So, yeah. But anyways, thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.